Welcome. Deltarune's future chapters are some of the most highly anticipated video game releases in recent memory. Hey, I said one of, okay? And with anticipation comes speculation. Speculation on release dates, gameplay features and plot details. And most importantly for this video, speculation about the game's setting. Where will each future Dark World take place in, and what will its theme be? Quite a few people have taken a stab at answering this question, and I thought I'd throw my hat into the ring. In this video, I will analyze each of the known Dark Worlds, looking for foreshadowing and common themes. Then, using the power of facts and logic, I will predict each future Dark World. Don't believe me? Well, keep watching this video and I'll prove it to you. I want to shout out Pretendo and Half Red Chaos for their videos on the subject. It was a good jumping off point for my research. The links to both of them will be in the description below. Also, while I was gathering footage for this video, I saw this video by Black Chestnut. Now, when I saw the thumbnail, I thought, oh no, please don't tell me this is happening. I click on their video and sure enough, my fears are realized. This person just straight up made the exact same theory as me, which I swear was not intentional. I did not watch this video before writing this video script. In fact, I had come up with this theory like way before I started doing YouTube, and it's just been sitting in my noggin, taking up space. The fact that two people independently came to the same conclusion is pretty wild and probably means this theory is true, but I would feel really bad if I just made this video without mentioning Black Chestnut's video, since they basically say the same thing. So go check out their video, the link is in the description. They deserve all the credit. I'm really sorry to Black Chestnut. This is just a disaster. But anyway, let's get into the video. Before we can make any predictions, let's look at all the information we know for sure about the future chapters. The first thing that needs to be addressed is how much we can rely on foreshadowing. According to the Deltarune 2020 status update, which was released before Chapter 2, the entire game has been outlined and most of the scenes have been scripted. So, since the entire story has already been planned out, this means Toby can start sprinkling breadcrumbs throughout the game to foreshadow future events. So for this theory, I will be heavily relying on foreshadowing. A major event that has been foreshadowed so far is the Roaring. So we're introduced to the concept of the Roaring at the end of Chapter 2. Basically, if enough Dark Worlds are created, a post-apocalyptic event called the Roaring will happen and destroy the world. Now, there's a concept in writing known as Chekhov's gun. It's a writing principle that states every element in your story should be relevant to the plot, and if it isn't, it should be cut. A good example of Chekhov's gun is Chekhov's gun. One must never place a rifle on stage if it isn't going to go off. Going back to Deltarune, a whole ass 80-second dramatic sequence is like dedicated to explaining what the Roaring is. I mean, a whole song is made for it and everything. This means that it will likely play a part in the story later on. Specifically, I think it's being set up that the Roaring will eventually happen. For one thing, the whole conflict is centered around the Roaring. The main antagonist is called the Roaring Knight, meaning they clearly want to cause it, and the heroes don't, so the Knight opens a Dark World, the heroes close it. That's basically the driving conflict of the whole story. But as the story nears its end, something needs to happen to raise the stakes to its peak. After all, in a typical 3-act structure, the character's lowest point, their rock bottom, will happen right before the climax, and it spells out the beginning of the final act of the story. And what spells out rock bottom more than the literal end of the world? It just makes too much sense. So since the Roaring will be near the end of the story, it follows that one of the final Dark Worlds is gonna be a little wacky, a little wild, you know, catastrophic enough to cause the Roaring. So that's basically my first prediction. One of the last Dark Worlds will be opened in, say, a public place, like, you know, at the festival people keep talking about, and it'll like engulf the whole town and cause the Roaring. I say one of because I don't think the last Dark World will be in public at all. In fact, I think it'll be buried deep underground. That's right, I think the last Dark World will be in the bunker. Once again, I'd like to bring up Chekhov's gun because the inside of the bunker is being set up as one of the greatest mysteries in this game. Why does it make the scary entry 17 noise? Is its room number being 17 a coincidence? And what is entry 17's experiment about anyway? The darkness keeps growing, shadows cutting deeper. Is this indicating that Gaster's final experiment is about a dark world? And what's with all the secretive talk about darkness anyway? Unused lines saying, it's dark, it's so dark here. Spamton talking about how it's still dark, so dark. That weird web page on the Spamton sweepstake talking about, but what if it could get darker than dark? Are all these hints pointing to there being a darkness in the bunker? A darkness that keeps growing? A darkness that's darker than dark? dark? If so, what part does Gaster play in all this? Why is he talking about the Deltarune prophecy and wingdings on Deltarune's official website? Why is this leitmotif contained in the song that plays during the Goner Maker sequence? And why is that song called Another Hymn in the files? Is this a callback to his theme in Undertale being called Hymn in the files? Is this all hinting to him being the narrator of the Goner Maker sequence? And speaking of Goners, why does the vessel we make look so similar to Goner Kid and the Gaster followers? Why does this sequence happen at all if all of our answers are going to be discarded? Chekhov's gun rears its head again. Maybe this sequence exists because it's being set up we're eventually going to control the vessel. Maybe after Chris, say, gets sick of us and rips us out for good? Speaking of Chris, why do they seem to have trauma associated with the bunker? Could it have anything to do with the unfortunate, shall I say, predicament they find themselves in? I just dumped a shitload of questions on you. Questions I can answer for now, but I believe that the never-ending puzzle that is Deltarune's narrative has a solution, and that solution is hidden within the bunker, which will remain locked until Chapter 7. But when those doors do open, we will be given our answers and be forced to face the final obstacle of this game, our greatest challenge. I don't know what it is, but I know it will happen, and that is my first prediction for this video. Okay, I just went a little off topic there, so let's get back to the original topic. What information about the future chapters do we know for sure? Well, we know for sure that Chapter 3's Dark World will be TV themed since, you know, I know, not the most convincing argument, but don't worry, I'll address this later on in the video. Let's just pretend that it's not in debate what Chapter 3's Dark World theme will be, and let's just say that it is TV themed and TV themed alone, alright? We also know that Chapter 3 will take place over a single night. This is because in the 2022 Deltarune status update, Toby released a song for Home Day's theme, and it's labeled with this statement: "After the dark night, the sun shines brightly." The dark night in question is clearly in reference to the events of Chapter 3. We also know that church services will be held the day following Chapter 3 because of Rudy's dialogue where he talks about wanting to go to church tomorrow. This is important because if there is going to be a church Dark World, it makes the most amount of sense for it to happen on that day. So right after Chapter 3 in Chapter 4. Another thing we can infer from the publicly available information is that Chapter 5 will end in a bang. This is because Chapter 5 was originally intended to be released with Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. And the question one has to ask is why? Why not just release them individually? Sure, Toby Fox said Chapter 3 wasn't very story heavy, but why not release it with Chapter 4 and just forget about Chapter 5? Why did he seem so dead set on releasing these three together, only changing his plans when it became clear that Chapter 5 would take too long to develop? Could it be that he wants to end things off with a bang before there's a long break between releases? I don't think it's like roaring levels of big, but it'd have to be exciting enough to keep people talking until the next release. Admittedly, this is all very speculative on my part, but I still think it's a possibility. There's one last thing I need to mention before we get into things. It's widely believed by most people in the fandom that there will only be 7 chapters in total for Deltarune, and this is because the chapter select screen shows 7 chapters in total, but things are much more complicated than that. Firstly, Toby has never publicly confirmed how many chapters there will be in total, and so far he's only ever mentioned the development of like chapters 3 through 5 and hasn't really talked about chapters 6 and 7. Also, in the game's files, there are chapter logos going all the way up to 10. So like, what's going on here? Are there actually going to be 10 chapters to this game? Well, I can't give any definite answers at this point because it's just too early in development to tell what's going on here. Toby has never gone out and said how many chapters he wants this game to have, which implies he wants to keep it secret for now. But if he wants to keep it secret, it seems very out of character for him to just leave these unused logos in the files. Usually he's pretty good about like clearing the files out of assets from future chapters because he doesn't want to spoil the story, right? So it's very out of character for him to just leave in these files basically revealing how many chapters was going to be when that's never been publicly talked about, right? So it's possible that he was just experimenting with things and doesn't intend to actually have 10 chapters, which is why he didn't bother removing any of these files. But then again, I don't know why he would be experimenting with the logos in this way if he doesn't intend there to be 10 chapters. Like, it's all very confusing here. I don't know what's going on. It's just too early to tell. And it is possible that even if Toby actually does want to have 10 chapters, he may decide that working on Deltarune for the next 20 years isn't something he wants to do, so he just releases 7 chapters anyway. But since we don't know for sure, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to make one theory that assumes there's gonna be 7 chapters, and then I'll tweak that theory and make another theory that assumes there's gonna be 10 10 chapters. Alright, now that we've laid out all the known facts, let's start the analysis section of this video. In order to predict the future Dark Worlds, we will have to examine previous Dark Worlds for patterns. As the saying goes, once is happenstance, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern. Luckily for us, we have 3 Dark Worlds to work with: the Card Kingdom Dark World, the Cyber City Dark World, and the TV Dark World. But Sophia, you may be saying, what about the Castle Town? The reason why Castle Town isn't being considered here is because it doesn't have a theme at all. You see, each dark fountain creates a different world, a world whose darkness reflect the will of its fountain. But though these darkness can exist in their own worlds, they may not belong if they go to another. Castletown's grand fountain is made of pure darkness. As long as it stays flowing, any darkner can live there. So it's kind of implied that the reason why any darkner from any world can exist in Castletown is 1, because Castletown is made of pure darkness, and 2, because Castletown doesn't have a theme. Castletown not having a theme and Castletown being made of pure darkness is like linked in some way. Like maybe the reason why the Cyber City Dark World and the Card Kingdom Dark World have themes at all is because their dark fountains aren't made of pure darkness. Like if they're not made of pure darkness, that implies that they have some sort of impurity. So maybe the impurities are the will of the fountain or the influences on the room causing these dark fountains to have themes. Basically, what I'm trying to say is Castletown doesn't have a theme because it's made of pure darkness. Therefore, if we're trying to analyze patterns in the Dark World's themes, there's really no point in including Castletown because it doesn't have a theme, right? So it has no useful information. So that's why I'm excluding Castletown from the discussion. A question some of you may be asking right now is, why would there be a common theme shared between the Dark Worlds at all? Wouldn't the theme be random? Wouldn't it just be based on what room the Dark World happens to be in? Why would there be a pattern? And you know, maybe from an in-universe perspective, there is no real reason why each Dark World would have a common theme, but from a writing perspective, there's usually overarching themes that exist throughout a story, right? That's just a common thing. So maybe for aesthetic purposes and thematic purposes, all of the Dark Worlds have some sort of common theme. And just by analyzing the known Dark Worlds, I have so far been able to identify a common theme throughout all of them. So let's talk about that. So the Card Kingdom has a board game theme, the Cyber City has an internet theme, and the TV world, of course, has a TV theme. Now, what do board games, TV, and the internet all have in common? Is it that they're forms of escapism? Sure, I guess you can say that, but I think you can be a little more specific than that. What these things all have in common is that they're all forms of entertainment, and that, my friends, is a theme that I think every future Dark World will share. All except one. I think there will be one more Dark World that's similar to Castletown. One that's made of pure darkness and doesn't really have a theme. And that's the Dark World that's contained within the bunker, mostly because of these 4 quotes that I already talked about, which kind of implies that there's a pure darkness or a darkness that's darker than dark inside the bunker. I think that's what's being set up, obviously. So yeah, the bunker will not have a theme. So that's my second prediction, I guess. Alright, so every other Dark World will have an entertainment theme. So let's list out every form of entertainment there is and see if any of them make for good Dark Worlds. So, for forms of entertainment, we have toys, music, board games, books, movies, TV shows, theater, sports, news, radio, video games, amusement parks, and the internet. I'm gonna move the known Dark World themes to the top of the list, and I'll label them with their corresponding chapters. And yes, I did merge board games with toys because there are toys in chapter 1, and I think we can all agree that board games are technically toys. Like, you play board games. You're supposed to like imagine a made-up scenario and like play with board games. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. We've all played toys. We've all played board games before. They are very similar to each other. Anyway, I'm just gonna remove toys from this graphic for no reason. It's solely not because I photoshopped several versions of this list that only mentions board games and not toys, because I forgot about toys. And I totally didn't notice my mistake as I was editing the video and am too lazy to remake these images. Nope, that did not happen. So let's move on. Looking at this list, you may have noticed something. Sports in the news is just TV, so I'm gonna merge these 3 together. I guess this is my third prediction because I don't think sports is anywhere on the chapter 3 marketing. Maybe I'll have to relook through it, but I'm pretty sure sports are not in any of the marketing. So there you go. You may have noticed something else. Movies are far too similar to TV shows, to the point where I don't think there would be much of a difference between a TV Dark World and a movie dark world. I think in order for each chapter to be strong, there needs to be a very distinctive style between each dark world, and I just don't really see that happening if movies and TV shows have separate dark worlds. To me, it's just kind of a waste of a chapter, so I will be merging movies with TV shows, and yes, I am aware that movies and TV shows are not the same thing. They are two different mediums of art, but like, come on, name a single genre that hasn't been successfully adapted into both movies and TV shows. Also, movies are played on TV all the time. In fact, Chris and Susie were literally watching a movie before they fell asleep, so I think it's pretty obvious that movies will be included in Chapter 3. So yeah, I'm merging movies with TV shows. Alright, let's talk about radio. Who the fuck listens to it anymore? I mean, most people listen to music on like YouTube or Spotify or Amazon Music, and if you want to hear someone talk about current events like a radio show host would, you can just listen to a podcast or watch YouTube. In fact, most radio shows release their talking segments on podcasting platforms. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is radio hasn't exactly been culturally relevant for a while now, especially not in the younger generation, which is Deltarune's target audience. So I highly doubt there's gonna be a radio-themed dark world, so I'm just gonna take it off the list. Although, now that I think about it, it must really suck to be a radio show host these days. People like Howard Stern used to be so big back in the 2000s, but look at him now. He's completely washed up. The only time he's in the headlines is when he's like taking pot shots at like podcasters or podcasting in general.
And if you sit in your room and do a podcast, you're pretending to be a broadcaster. Take the podcast and throw it out the window.
He seems pretty jealous, and if I'm being honest, I can't exactly blame him. If my job was rendered completely obsolete, I'd also be resentful of the people who replaced me. And honestly, I'd be resentful in general of people who still have careers, simply because they happen to choose the right profession at the right time. Lucky bastards. If I didn't know any better, I might go a little insane. Anyway, on a completely unrelated note, I think a washed up unemployed former radio show host makes for a decent secret boss. It would fit into the pattern of these bosses being sort of like outcasts of society. It would also fit into the theme of the secret bosses knowing who the previous secret boss is, because maybe this boss is like jealous of Spamton because his career is internet based and the internet made radio relevant. I'm just spitballing here. I kind of doubt this will be the secret boss just because a washed up radio show host is a little too similar to Spamton, who's a washed up salesman. But if radio is going to be included in these games at all, it'll be in Chapter 3, which focuses on forms of public broadcasting, like TV, so I'm just gonna merge it with TV. And while I'm at it, I'll just merge theater with TV as well. I wouldn't say theater isn't culturally relevant, because it obviously is. There are still many critically and financially successful theater productions coming out to this day, but come on, when was the last time you went to see a fucking play? I just think that theater is a little too niche and a bit too archaic of a subject to base an entire dark world on. So if theater does make an appearance in these games, it would be briefly in Chapter 3. After all, movies and TV shows do find their roots in theater. Hell, so does radio. Also, I do remember seeing old plays on TV as a kid, so it might still fit into the TV theme. So there. It may seem at this point that Chapter 3 is a little too stacked in ideas, but it actually isn't unusual for these games. After all, Chapter 1 isn't just about like board games in general. It touches on specific examples like chess and checkers, various card games, various tabletop games, jacks, whatever the hell these things are, Legos, I think, and many more. Chapter 2 isn't just about the internet, it's about computers, software, hardware, malware, task managers, errors, social media, search engines, advertisements, TOS contracts, online video games, online music, emails, and much more. So yeah, every game covers a variety of topics in their theme, even if it's just briefly, so I still stand by my Chapter 3 predictions, but it does look like an eyesore, so let me just change that. So now all we're left with is music, books, amusement parks, and video games. Music, the most beautiful of all the art forms, and the least likely to have its own dark world. Firstly, music as a concept is already kind of covered by the Sweet Cap and Cakes. I also don't know what a music-themed dark world would look like. Maybe it would like draw inspiration from music videos, but you know, music music is not a visual medium, so I'm kind of just having a hard time imagining what a music-themed Dark World would be like. It would just be kind of weird, honestly. Also, music is already well represented by Deltarune's banger soundtrack, so I just don't really see the need for a music-themed Dark World, so I'm gonna remove it from the list. Books. Food for your mind. And just some food for thought. Why did Toby Fox decide to make Gerson an author? Like, sure, it fits his character, but is that the only reason? Is it possible that this fact is gonna be plot relevant later on? You know, like there's a lot of dialogue talking about the Lord of the Hammer series. Is this foreshadowing that it'll feature in a book-themed Dark World? Now, you may be saying, aren't books a little too similar to movies and TV shows? But I would argue not. For obvious reasons, I mean, reading a book is entirely different from watching a movie and TV show. And also, certain genres are much more popular in books than movies, like sci-fi and fantasy. Because, you know, typically sci-fi and fantasy, these movies and TV shows usually have like absurdly high budgets, and budgetary constraints aren't really a thing in books. So I would still argue that a book-themed Dark World would be a very different experience from a TV-themed or movie-themed Dark World. You could have a lot of book-specific jokes and references. So yeah, I still think this is a possibility. So if there is gonna be a book-themed Dark World, where would it be? The obvious choice would be the library, but there's already been a Dark World in the library, and it would just kind of be boring if there was another Dark World in the same location, so I'm not gonna consider the library. But what about the church? Going back to Gerson, he's an author who married a librarian and who wrote his books as bedtime stories for his children. It follows that these children will grow up to be big book lovers. And conveniently enough, one of his children, Father Alvin, works in the church. The church seems to be a pretty obvious place for a Dark World. I mean, like, for some reason the inside is being kept secret. I wonder why. So yeah, I think it's being set up that there's gonna be a Dark World in the church. So what if it's a book-themed Dark World? I know that a lot of churches will usually have like an office for the priest, so maybe Father Alvin has a library in his office. I imagine that this hypothetical library would have a wide variety of fiction, non-fiction, and religious texts, which could form the basis of a book-themed Dark World. Like maybe we get a sci-fi and fantasy section, a history book section, and then we get like a religion section. Like, it sounds fun to me. And as I discussed before, a church Dark World would take place during like chapter 4, so that's gonna be my final prediction. Chapter 4's Dark World will be book-themed and located in the church. So let's update the list. Alright, so next we have video games. I know it sounds kind of weird, like Deltarune, the video game, is gonna have a video game themed Dark World. And yes, I am aware that video games are covered in chapter 2 technically, but come on, Deltarune does meta shit like this all the time. And I think there's a lot of ground that can be covered by a video game themed Dark World. Chris, Susie, Noelle, Birdley, all the major characters so far have been gamers. And a big part of these games, including Undertale, has been deconstructing common tropes in video games and blah blah blah. Insert pretentious video game bullshit here. Like, sorry if I seem to have a bit of content for this idea. It's just, I have PTSD from a certain group of people defending a certain movie trilogy. Now whenever I hear meta storytelling and subversion, it just sets up my fight or flight response. Okay, I'm sorry. But I promise you, a video game themed Dark World that deconstructs video games in the same way Undertale does sounds like a great idea. Hell, a video game themed Dark World that deconstructs Undertale, kind of like how Deltarune is doing, also sounds like a great idea. So I'm really feeling this idea. I predict that this will be chapter 6's Dark World. Now, wait a minute, why did we skip chapter 5? Well, going back to what I said earlier, I believe chapter 5 is gonna end off on a bang. And based on the marketing material that's been released in some of the status updates, it shows Chris and Susie exploring town, hanging out in various locations in town. So what I think is gonna happen is there's gonna be a break in the story where for a majority of chapter 5, it's just gonna be us like exploring town and having fun. And there's not gonna be a Dark World at all. And as the chapter nears its end, Chris and Susie decide to visit Rudy and Noelle in the hospital. They go to the hospital, open the hospital door, and boom, it's a Dark World in Rudy's hospital room. They jump inside to save their friend and cut to black. We're gonna have to wait until chapter 6 to figure out what happens next. Now, why would this hypothetical Dark World be video game themed? Well, you know how Noelle always brings in Dragon Blazers, the video game, to play with her father? Yeah, that's why it's video game themed. Now you may be saying, well, since the way chapter 5 is gonna be released has been changed, like it's not gonna be released with chapter 3 and 4, could things change substantially from here? Well, no, because as Toby Fox says, the game has kind of already been planned out and work has already kind of been done for chapter 5. It's probably probably going to be a little bit difficult to drastically change Chapter 5's plot to include the video game themed Dark World in Chapter 5. Also, he could still maintain this like cliffhanger effect he wants to do by simply releasing Chapter 5 by itself. So I thoroughly believe in this prediction. Just to recap, Chapter 5 is going to be a Light World only chapter, and then Chapter 6 will be the video game themed chapter. So let me add that to the list. So the last item we have on our list is amusement parks. We know from the mayor's secretary that there's going to be a festival in town soon. Susie also asked who we would like to bring to the festival at the end of Chapter 2, so it's clearly being set up that this festival is going to happen near the end of the story. If I had to guess, it would be around like Chapter 6 or 7. Now when I hear festival, I think of one of those like traveling carnivals, maybe combined with like a parade. So if there's going to be a festival Dark World, it would probably have like a creepy carnival theme or something, which sounds pretty interesting to me. So since this Dark World will be opened in public, it would likely engulf the entire town and cause the roaring, which would in turn cause the climax of the story. And the climax usually happens around the end of the story, which means that this whole amusement park Dark World would have to happen at the very end of the story. So like I said, around Chapter 6 or 7. I'm assuming there's going to be a calm before the storm where like the characters are hanging out at the festival and there's like character driven drama. If you've seen my desk video before, you know that I think there's gonna be some family drama between the dreamers and the holidays, and I think that this drama will be resolved near the end of the story. So since the mayor like planned the festival, maybe this family drama will reach its peak at the festival when, you know, Azriel is coming home from college, where like everyone involved in this family drama has a reason to be in the same place. And just as it seems people are starting to get along again and the conflict is resolving itself, boom, another dark fountain. But this time things are different. This Dark World isn't just confined to a single room. It's outside and it's spreading. What I'm imagining in my head is the knight starts opening dark fountains in public like a maniac. Like maybe they even open like multiple dark fountains around town and this engulfs the whole town and causes the roaring, and oh my god, things are so crazy. It's so Jover. And then that's kind of what we do for the entirety of like Chapter 6 or Chapter 7. You know, we're running around town frantically trying to close all the dark fountains. Like it sounds like extremely chaotic and interesting. I predict that this is gonna happen in Chapter 7, and you may be saying, well, isn't the bunker gonna be in Chapter 7? But I kind of doubt the bunker is gonna be big enough to sustain an entire chapter. Who knows, maybe the bunker is huge, but usually bunkers aren't like that big, right? So I don't think a bunker Dark World will be that big either. So I'm kind of getting the impression that we're gonna spend most of the time in the amusement park themed Dark World, and then when we overcome that challenge, we'll go into the bunker and have the final boss, and then the game ends, right? So basically my final prediction for this section of the video is that Chapter 7 is gonna be mostly amusement park themed, and then near the end it's gonna be bunker themed, I guess. So let me add that to the list. Alright, so these are my final Dark World predictions, provided of course that there's only gonna be 7 chapters. Now I need to tweak these predictions to account for if there's 10 chapters, but before we do that, if you're enjoying this video so far, and don't you dare click off, or this guy will wake you up in the morning with a kiss on the lips. If you're enjoying this video so far, consider checking out the rest of my channel. All I make is Deltarune and Undertale theory content. If you end up liking my videos, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you really like me, you should totally join my membership program. For only $1 a month, you get custom emojis, badges, and you get your name read out loud by me at the end of every video. Alright, my daily e-baking session is over. Let's get back to the video. So now let's remake the theory to account for if there's 10 chapters. I still think that the book Dark World will happen in Chapter 4, then there will be a break in Chapter 5, followed by the video game Dark World in Chapter 6. The amusement park Dark World will still happen at the end of the story, so in this case it would be in like the Chapter 9, Chapter 10 area of the story. So as you can see, we need to fill 3 extra chapters with content. Since we have extra time, we'll stretch the bunker Dark World to take the entirety of Chapter 10, and we'll push the amusement park Dark World back to Chapter 9. I also feel like this is a good opportunity to have a Dark World that takes 2 chapters to complete, since the amusement park Dark World will be the most difficult to deal with since it would engulf the entire town. I think that would be the one to take 2 chapters to beat. So this leaves 1 spot left that we need to fill with an entirely new Dark World. Flower King seems like a good location for a Dark World, and as for its theme, this may seem a bit obvious. It would be like gardening themed or jungle themed. But wait a minute, jungles and gardening don't fit into the theme of entertainment. But you know what does fit into the theme of entertainment? The random comic book that's just sitting on Asgore's TV. Didn't think Asgore was a comic book guy, but okay. If I had to guess what this comic book Dark World would be like, I think it'll be similar to the comic book sequence in Off, which conveniently enough, Toby is a huge fan of Off and cites it as inspiration in the Undertale art book. In fact, there are quite a few things about Off that are very similar to Deltarune and Undertale. As for what chapter this Dark World will take place in, I've arbitrarily chosen chapter 7, kind of by process of elimination. Chapter 7 is the only vacant chapter left, but I don't know, I feel like it also makes sense story-wise. Asgore and Toriel talk about having a family meeting to discuss what they're gonna do when Asriel comes home from college, and it seems like Asriel is gonna come home near the very end of the story, which means that this meeting would have to happen sometime before that. So like, if he's coming home in chapter 9 or chapter 10, that means this meeting, family meeting, would have to happen in like chapter 7, right? And it would make sense for a Flower King Dark World to happen when the family has a reason to meet up in the Flower King. So there. And yes, I understand that comic books technically fall under the book category, but come on, this and this are not the same thing. Comic books are not real books. Sorry. So I think a comic book Dark World would be very different from a book Dark World. So let me update the list. Alrighty then, we have my final predictions. Now let's just take a second to admire the craftsmanship of these lists. Let's just sit back and absorb all the 100% logical, empirically proven facts I just spat. Yeah, So you may have noticed something. The entire theory is predicated on entertainment being the common theme, but like the theme I established for chapter 2 and chapter 3 are kind of shaky. So 1, addressing chapter 3, right? If it's TV themed, then sure, it's entertainment themed, but we don't know for sure it's going to be exclusively TV themed. It could be TV in living room themed. It could be TV in kitchen themed. It even seems like it could be like yard themed, because technically, like, Chris did open the door, right? And the darkness is spilling out into the yard. So maybe the yard will have an influence on the Dark World too. So there's just a lot of stuff we don't really know about chapter 3, and I don't really have a way to solve this problem, right? I cannot conclusively prove to you that chapter 3 is gonna be TV Dark World. I can only point to all the marketing surrounding chapter 3 that exclusively shows TV themed stuff. So if I had to guess, in my personal opinion, I think that chapter 3 will be exclusively TV themed, but I acknowledge I can't 100% prove that. So this is just a flaw in the theory for now. Another thing you may have noticed is chapter 2's theme arguably isn't the internet. You could make the argument that it's computer themed, and since computers aren't exclusively made to be entertaining, the entertainment theme falters a little. Because, you know, in chapter 2, we see things like the task manager, we see mice and plugs. Like, what does all that have to do with the internet, right? I mean, this seems to be just like generic computer stuff, right? But since all the stuff in chapter 2 is kind of related to software and hardware, I think it still technically does fit into the internet theme, because software, right? Like the video games or the music or, you know, all the other stuff that's talked about, like the computer viruses, right? All that stuff can be downloaded on the internet, and that's how most people download these files on their computers. Like, this isn't the 90s anymore. We don't really buy CDs from stores and download them on our computers. Most people download their files from the internet. So you can argue that all of the software references in this game are still internet-based references. And as for the hardware references, this is a bit more complicated to explain, but the internet is not purely digital, right? All the internet is it's a complicated web of routers and servers and computers all communicating with each other, right? And these things are all hardware. So you can't really divorce the internet from hardware like mice and plugs and stuff like that, right? So I would still argue that the theme is the internet. But I do admit, even with this explanation, there are still some other problems with it, like how the internet is technically down when the fountain is created. So is it really internet themed? Again, that's another kind of weak point in the theory. theory, I would still argue Chapter 2 was internet themed and therefore entertainment themed. But you know, I know that if I don't mention this, a million people are gonna comment about it, and probably still have commented about it because they haven't watched this far in the video. But yeah. Looking at the two versions of the list I made, if I had to guess which version is more accurate, I would pick the one with 7 chapters as opposed to 10 because I highly doubt there's gonna be 10 chapters. I mean, I really hope there's not gonna be 10 chapters. And if there is, I totally won't start cyberbullying Toby Fox for wasting my goddamn time for so long. No, that totally won't happen. That's a joke, I swear. I would be kind of annoyed if there were 10 chapters, even though I love these games. Like, really? If there's gonna be 10 chapters, I'm literally gonna be like 30 years old and married with children by the time this game is over. So yeah, I'm putting my money on the 7-chapter theory being true. This is the end of the video, but what do you guys think? Do you think my theory is correct and the common theme is the internet, or do you think it's something else? Make sure to leave all your thoughts and theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you to my wonderful members, Mellow Mackie, PF247, Rem, Silly Willy Billy Silly, and No Username. You guys are all amazing, and I'm really grateful for your support. And to all of you, thank you for watching my video. Bye-bye!